Hello, I am Nancy Levens.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Levens. I'm a member of the board of Clinician Museum. I'm the president. I've been involved with the museum for probably around 10 years now. This is our first design awards, which we're thrilled about, and it went the submission process and the caliber of the submissions far exceeded anything you could have hoped for, including
That's
yours.
awesome.
So maybe, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, just in case?
Yeah, no problem. I'm Stuart Karten. I'm the founder and principal and president of Karten Design, which I started about 37 years ago. And we're a design firm that is primarily focused in healthcare, specifically designing medical devices and digital experiences that either go with those devices or are standalone.
So what made you select this project for as a submission? And describe the project a little bit if you can.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So the project we submitted was for our work done with Axonics. And Axonics is a company that I actually helped start because I brokered an introduction between Al Mann Foundation, who was looking to license the technology on a very small, innovative neurostimulator, which is an implant that gets put in the body, and with neuromodulation, they hook them up to different nerves and they can affect different things through that. In this case, I brokered the introduction from Al Mann Foundation to Ray Cohen, who's a serial CEO who I'd worked with for over 30 years. And he was looking for his next project, as he would say. And the first thing, he knew that there was potential for that particular product, but he didn't know where to deploy it, meaning what condition to go after. And we helped him do the research to understand that a growing issue for women mostly is overactive bladder. And there was only one other competitor, Medtronic, in the space. And we pretty much knew that we had the ability to go in and take market share from them. So that was sort of the incubating of the actual idea. So we helped name the company, we designed the logo, and then we started analyzing all the parts and pieces and the experiences that were part of what it meant to use this. So the implant is implanted and hooked up to the sacral nerve, which is in your lower back. And basically what it does functionally is it sort of, your mind is telling your urethra that it wants to pee, okay? And you can't stop it. It's not stress leaking like some women have from having a baby or such, but it's more of like kind of a mind over matter scenario. And this basically modulates that nerve and can actually reduce the feeling that you need to pee, and actually does reduce the fact that you are going to pee. So
and this is it's electrical impulses, is that what you said?
Yes. Yeah, so there's basically an implant, which is in essence a very fancy battery that then is hooked up to a tube, and at the end of those tubes are tiny little electrodes that get put in contact with the sacral nerve. And the sacral nerve is the nerve that communicates between your mind and your bladder and your rectum as well. So if you have issues with incontinence, thank you, it can be a use for that as well. So there's two parts to the system. There's the clinician part, and when they do the implant and the surgery, the next thing they need to do is program it. And we designed a bespoke tablet that is used by the clinician to actually program the device. And Ray is a very innovative CEO and is a big believer in design, and has often talked about our relationship as his secret weapon, using design in the healthcare space to really make it something new and different.
Right.
And so the first thing we did is, instead of just looking at other programmers, we went and met with docs and we went deep on understanding what transpires during the programming process, and built a completely simple, new, unique way to actually program the device. So that's the clinician side. But the other piece of it is, as a patient, and typically what happens is they call this the third line of defense, or the third line. If you present yourself and say, I'm leaking, I have overactive bladder, the first thing they're going to do is tell you to do your Kegel exercises and strengthen your your lower area. The next thing would be drugs, and the drugs are horrible. Their side effects are just really not worth it, and very few people stay on the drugs. And then if you get past that and you're educated about the fact that this will actually fix the condition, that's when somebody would go in and actually opt for it. And the way it works is you actually run a trial. Before you put an implant in the body, you leave one externally and you hook up to it and you go for 2 weeks. The insurance companies want to make sure that if they're going to spend the $25,000 or $30,000 for this procedure, that it works on you. And you get to know if it works on you. And it's like 90% effective. So, but as a patient, you have a couple of things that you have to keep doing once you get the implant. One is you have to keep charging that little implant in the back of your back.
I saw that on the video.
Right, and
looked very
comfortable. And basically, we looked at all the competitors of how they charged, and there's other neuromodulation systems out there, and most of them required you to stay on a couch and be plugged into the wall for the 2 hours that it took to actually charge the implant. So we knew that was a horrible experience, and we designed a system that actually allowed you to wear it and be mobile during the 2 hours. So that was a very big innovation. Nobody had done that before. And the way it actually anchors to the body with the adhesive pads and the way they flip over once you get in the location. You also are giving sound and haptic feedback to get it right above the implant, like boop, 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 boop. And then it buzzes and you know you're on top of the implant, and then you flip these pedals and you adhere it to the body. That was one area of the patient experience we dealt with. The other is you get a remote control. So you can actually, you're given 4 or so different programs that you get to try and see which are the most effective for you, because they all have little nuances. And typically the way it worked is, or the way it had been working is, they give you something that looks like a giant toy remote, and like, you'd have to take it out, and you're doing this, while you're out and about, and it just is stigmatizing. We didn't really want to do something, and at the time we couldn't put it into an app on the phone, which is now the way to do it, but we did it in a way that looked like a key fob. Okay, and that's that little white with green piece, and that has it tells you the charge of the implant. It connects to the implant so that you know what the charge level is, and of course you can control your levels with it. And you're not pulling something out that people are going like, wow, what's wrong with you? Do you have a medical device or something you're controlling? It looks very benign, and actually it's been on the market for a couple of years, and Ray has told me numerous times that people love the remote. Like, it is just, the patients just think it's the best because they don't have to fuss around with something that makes them feel
compact, right? I mean,
it's very compact.
Very useful.
Yeah, it's the size of a car key, that you'd use to arm and unarm your car. So those are some of the highlights of what we got to do. We as part of our work, we spent time with a lot of women who had this, and it's similar to the hearing aid work that we do. As people are in denial about using a hearing aid, they retreat from society and social activities, and they just don't go out. And the same at this case, it's really kind of a nasty situation where you have to be thinking about, where's the closest bathroom, where are my pads, all the things that go into planning.
Life condition.
Right. And we heard the same thing we heard with hearing aids, which is, I just decided that I just won't go out. I mean, it's just not worth it. So when they go through this procedure, when they get it and they actually get it fixed, it's like, you interview them again and they're like vibrant and out. Yeah. So that is, let's just say that's the root of the psychic income for us, right? Yeah, to be able to give people back their lives, in essence.
Wow, I love that. The root of the psychic income. Damn, that's really eloquent. This is just a weird aside, but are these marketed to geriatric communities, like geriatric physicians and things like that?
No, it's not. It can be, somebody can have this in their 20s, 30s. It's not necessarily an age-related thing. I would say on average it is, but it's not that. And it's urogynecologists. That's, so what typically would happen is you'd go to your normal gynecologist and you say, I feel like I have to pee all the time. And I'm leaking and this and that. And they go, do your Kegels, right? And then you come back and you say, that didn't work. And they say, okay, I'm going to send you to a urogynecologist. They're going to do the drugs to start. And then if they're informed about, neuromodulation, and of course now Axonics is making sure all of them are very informed. Right. And then they would offer this up as a potential treatment. And you can imagine there's a bit of a mental hurdle to get over an implant. That was another thing that we actually did some work on to understand how people think about and view putting something in the body, which is
it's a little scary. Yeah. The video just kind of compared it to a pacemaker.
Right.
And yeah, so, okay, so you can get your head around that, and that's accepted. That's a very kind of now common intervention.
That's right. So, and by that time, people have gone through these other efforts that have failed, so that more than likely they're going to do it.
Right, they're very primed for that.
Yeah. So the other thing that's exciting is they, after 4 or 5 years of working and developing it, in 2018 November they went public, and they came out at $15 for a share. Today it's at 55.
Wow.
And so so they're on a big growth pattern. They are spanking Medtronic. Medtronic is suing them and trying to get, keep them from overtaking the market.
That's which business.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm curious how there's technology in this, and there's science in this, there's the patient experience in this, and there's design.
Right.
And you mentioned that your client describes design as a secret weapon.
Right.
So as the design, it sounds like you still have to have a very, very robust understanding of the science and technology in order to then design something like this and have it be effective. So describe that collaborative process a little bit, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So to be clear, we had nothing to do with the design of the implant or the leads that come off of it or the surgical procedure to put it in. That was really resident at Axonics, and that's the core technology. So what's exciting about what we do is no matter what we work on, we have to become experts around it. And so, and we're always working on stuff that's new and different. And, like we're experts on hearing aids right now, we're experts on neuromodulation. We've had a really interesting business scenario with neuromodulation. Typically if we're a small company, if we were working for a company that makes ventilators, and another company came and said, oh, we want you to work on our ventilators, I can't firewall between those two, and I can't, and neither of them would want me working for each other. So I've been in situations many times where I say, sorry, we already are working with a ventilator company. With neuromodulation, every single company is focused on a particular condition. So with Axonics, of course, it's overactive bladder. Our other client, Nevro, that basically makes a spinal cord stimulation, they're dealing with spinal cord stimulation, which is back pain and spinal pain. They don't care about overactive bladder. They'll never do anything in overactive bladder. And the same goes for 3 or 4 other companies that we're working on.
So the basic premise is universal, is what you're saying?
The basic, right.
Pulses and all. Okay.
Yeah, the basic premise is the same from a functionality standpoint, and the experience, the parts and pieces are the same, meaning you need a clinician programmer, you need a way to charge the implant, and you need a remote control. So we're able to take all of that domain expertise and populate it across a number of different companies. And the joke I say is we're getting on everybody's nerves.
That's a tagline.
So we're doing hypertension on the vagus nerve. We're working on migraines. We're working on spinal cord stimulation. We're working on overactive bladder. And we've also in the past have worked on cochlear implant. A cochlear implant is basically where was the birth of neuromodulation. It was one of the first areas. So
very gratifying, because you're just really very gratifying.
So back to your original question though, how do we kind of reconcile this? So the first thing we're always doing is we're going to learn about the technology to the best of our ability. We're not going to be inside electrons and the electronics or any of that stuff. That's going to be the client. the thing we're looking at mostly, though, is really where are the touch points for people in the scenario, and to get the job done that those people are looking to do. So as I mentioned, there's the clinician part of it, which they got to do the surgery and implant it. Nothing for us to do there, but they also have to program it. So that's where we focused. And then, as I talked about with the patient side, the patient is responsible for charging it and using a remote control. And so we did all the research into the competitive products, as I spoke about earlier, to learn, what's the pain points, what works, what doesn't work, all of that, so that we knew we wanted to create a better experience for people. And a lot of the work we do in the healthcare space, we're trying to remove stigma. Nobody likes to feel like they're getting old or that they're, have issues. So they don't want to announce it or wear things or do things. So we've tried to reduce stigma through style and form and make things that look like they're just part of your everyday life,
right.
Which is what we, as I spoke about, that's what we applied to the remote control. And then, of course, the experience of like giving people 2 hours, a month or a couple of weeks back to them, so they could still be mobile. We literally, when we did the research for the competitive devices, we had women sitting on the couch holding their baby, their phones, and they're just sitting there trying to multitask while this thing is hooked up and plugged into the wall. And, it became very obvious that we had to create a mobile solution. And so that was what drove that approach.
How long did it take from the origin of the original discussion to kind of the final product? How long does that process take? Or did it with this?
Typically a year before you can have something that's working. It took a little longer because there were a bunch of elements. And then part of our process is to iterate. And so, for example, with this unique adhesive piece that we did, I wish I had it here with me, but with the unique adhesive piece, we weren't sure if people would understand it and how to get, to actually use it and apply it. So we went through multiple mock-ups and put them in the hands of users and watched them and talked to them and iterated, and we call fail forward fast, to get to something that people understood and know how to use it, and what the combination of the sound and the haptics, and then, what it meant to get it positioned. So, we did all that. And in the medical world, you have to do it. It's regulated that you do human factors testing. And it's typically broken into two parts. One's called formative, which is more that kind of low fidelity, get in front of people, see what they think, make sure they understand it and it works. Once you have that worked out, then the summative piece is really like box checking. If you don't really ever want to go in and do summative testing and fail. So it's typically you do it all informative and then the summative testing, but all of that has to be done and documented and submitted to the FDA, in addition to all of the other FDA requirements for those products. So
how
there's
long does it take the FDA to kind of turn around their?
Yeah, that could be anywhere from 6 months to a year.
Oh, that's brutal.
And it's typically, yes, it's brutal.
On the capital side, that's got to be brutal, that waiting.
Yeah. But that's why, with the COVID stuff, and we've been working on COVID testing projects, that emergency use authorization was a way to actually short circuit all that and get that done. And a lot of people in the industry are hoping that that style of, working in a more accelerated manner might take on and be a little more sticky, so that we're not sitting around for months waiting them to review and come back with comments and such.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
What was your first project that you felt represented you as an industrial designer?
So one of the first jobs I had out of school was working for Baxter, which is a big, large medical company. And now I'm happy to say they're a client of mine. But the first project I was given was a tool that was used for doing bone marrow transplants. Okay. And it had been developed by a doctor, and basically it was a long needle, and it was a thick, and inside is another rod, and there's a handle in the back. They drive it into your iliac crest, which is that bone right at the top of your butt. Then they pull out the rod, they put a syringe on it, and they start pulling out bone marrow. And at the time, this doctor designed it. It was called the Jamshidi needle, and it was made in all metal, which meant it had to go through and be autoclaved. And you know, at that time, it was a big movement and continues to be that you're better using devices one time. Use it once, it's sterile out of the package. You
Right.
take it, you throw it away. And so they wanted to convert this metal product to a plastic product. So I went and I did research and I found doctors who were doing it. And before they would pick up the needle to use it, after they had the patient prepped and ready to go, they would pick up a wad of gauze, cotton gauze, and put it in their hand to protect themselves from the knob that was on the top as they
Oh,
were
wow.
driving. And it was like, well, okay, this is totally counterintuitive. I mean, this device should not be hurting or helping, you know, hurting the doctor, right? And having him to protect himself as he's applying pressure. So what I did is I basically made the whole top curved and smooth and made it fit the hand. And then even when it came off and you attach the syringe, it still had a smooth thing. So it was, in essence, a pretty simple solution. But you know, the going in and watching, it's used quite a bit on children and watching them, these poor kids go through this. I mean, you know, I'd walk out of there just teary-eyed because this was so. To answer your question, that was the first project where I really understood what it meant to have empathy, and to how that empathy could actually drive the design and engineering of those products and really make a difference, right? Because obviously, unfortunate people who need, or they're donating bone marrow. In many cases, it's not that they're the ones that are sick. So why can't we upgrade that experience and actually, you know, help them with that? So that was pretty much.
You were trained as an industrial designer. Did you go to Art Center? Forgive me.
No, I went to Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay.
Yeah.
Majored in industrial design?
Correct. And
your first job out of the gate was with a medical device company, or?
No, my first job.
You're thinking that you kind of migrate into the medical arena?
No, it was an interesting transition. So when I first came out here, I worked for a consulting office, not far different than what I have in Beverly Hills. Worked on all kinds of stuff. I don't think there was many medical things, but it was mostly consumer products.
Huh?
That was for about a year. And then I went to work for Mattel, and I worked in the Barbie group.
No way! I have my dressing Barbie book. Okay, go ahead. I am like anyway, I digress. Okay.
So yeah, and I worked in the engineering group versus the design group.
Wait, this is like, so did you work on like the anatomical kind of, just like her kind of figure and the proportions and the mechanics of all of it?
I worked on her, most of that was established, right?
Yeah.
But there was the thing I did was called Kissing Barbie, and there was her back, you pressed on her back and she turned and, you know, looked like she was kissing. And I worked out the mechanism for all that.
Oh my God. Okay.
But I also worked on her townhouse and her fur and jewel safe and a whole bunch of other
Oh, she had that one house that looked incredibly kind of modern and cool. Okay. Yeah. So this is a digression, but and I apologize, but I just have to ask. So now, you know, 50 years later, which I realize you weren't involved with the origin of Barbie, there has been a movement to kind of recreate her in a manner that is more real.
Yes.
So when you were working on it then, did you think, did those kind of sociocultural kind of disconnects, did that jump out at you then?
Nope, not at all. I mean, we're talking 1980 or so.
Right.
It was, yeah, in fact, she was a really hot brand. The woman that oversaw the brand eventually became the CEO of Mattel, mm-hmm. You know, and really all they were doing was brand extensions. You know, they did the Barbie makeup and they did the cars and the townhouses and stuff. So they were really blowing out the brand. And I don't think they were, I know at that time, they weren't like thinking about it through a socially cultural correct mentality.
So fascinating. There's a documentary, was it on Netflix, that kind of tracked the group that was charged with this metamorphosis. Did you see it?
No, I haven't.
I'll send you a link. It is so fascinating. Okay, I shall end that digression. So with Barbie, then there were the mechanics underneath that you said it was a touch system, or?
Yeah, that caused her head to turn. But so what had happened was with little more detail, I didn't, I wasn't really happy there because I was doing much more engineering than real design.
Mhm.
And so after a year or so, I started fishing around looking for work. And that's when I got introduced to Baxter and got a job there. Now, most people don't understand, you know, wait, you were designing Barbie and then serious medical products. And it goes back to what I spoke about earlier. It's about high volume injection molded plastics. That's what I learned or knew and understood from my experience at Mattel that I could leverage in the medical world. And there was a lot of people.
Yeah. So what you take from, that's fascinating. I love it.
Yeah. And then
you were at
I
Baxter
continued.
for how long?
I was at Baxter for 2 years.
And when did you start your own studio, your own company?
Yeah, so I started in 1984.
Oh, so
and
right.
when I was at Baxter, I knew I wanted to do something different, but somebody who was at Baxter went to another medical company up in Oxnard. I went and visited him, and I was a cocky little guy and asked for, like, I want to be relocated to Malibu and I want this much money. And he said, yes, yes, yes. And so I had to take the job, but I literally hated it. So I took the job in August and then I left in December. So I was only there 3 months. And at that time we were getting ready for the Olympics in August. And I scored a job with the company that was one of the premier manufacturer or fabricators of some of the exhibits at the California Museum of Science and Industry. And I went to
That's incredible.
And so I went to him and I said, listen, I'm willing to work part-time, because at the other part of the time I was going to work freelance and start building, the business. And I said, but as we get closer to the Olympics, I'll work full-time, whatever it takes to get it done, because of course it has to be done. And that was a little cliff that I set up for myself. So, technically in August of 1984, when the Olympics kicked off, that's the last time I worked for anybody. And then
who were the exhibit designers that you worked with on the Olympic? Did you work with Sussman Frazier or?
We worked with the Eames office, because we were
the Eames office.
Yeah, which was,
wow.
For me, that was like, wow, to be even close. I got to spend time at the original office. I got to meet Ray. Charles had already been passed away. So they were refurbing Mathematica, which is their classic exhibit, and we got to work on that.
Yeah.
And then we worked on the GM exhibit that was there, but that was designed by a firm in Detroit.
Amazing. It's so great to talk to you and hear all this, because you wouldn't necessarily know. Eames Demetrius is on our board.
Oh yeah, no, I know Eames.
Yep. Oh, you know Eames.
Yeah.
He's a prince. He's just a wonderful, wonderful person. So we're grateful he's involved. But I love that. Wow. All right. So I think what brought you to the field, that was another one of the questions we're all asking, but what brought you, what made you curious, or what did you know about industrial design before you went to start it?
So
it was RISD?
Yeah, RISD. Yeah, so I'd been at a state university in New York for a couple of years and totally floundering, hated it, failing, miserably. And growing up in a middle-class family in New York, you don't do things that you work with your hands. Like, that's just not what you do. Those people go to vocational school and become plumbers and air conditioning people, blah, blah, blah. You go to university, you become a doctor, an attorney, or whatever, right? And so I kind of got shifted into that path. But I was really fortunate. I have two older sisters. The sister just above me, she was always very artistic, and she was studying fashion design at NYU, and she went to RISD for fashion design. And so she called me up one day and she goes, "You are not going to believe this. There's this thing called industrial design. It is you have to check it out." So I remember in Albany at the State University, I went to the library and I looked up industrial design. And it was like, wow, okay. And then I went and visited, and I met the head of the department, who was an amazing person, Mark Harrison. And I thought, okay, this is it. I mean, this is the perfect thing: solving problems, working with your hands, making stuff, sketching, drawing, all of that. And that was the beginning of the end.
Which leads me, Who are your mentors, or who are the people, not just your mentors, who as industrial designers do you admire in terms of what they do or do?
Well, Charles and Ray Eames for sure. That's a given. You know, their multidisciplinary approach of everything from furniture to exhibits and the way they approach work, I always looked up to. You know, there's some Herman Miller designers, you know, that Don Chadwick, who's a local, and the work that he's done for Herman Miller over the years. I really admire that. And then, you know, there's Frog Design, which was, you know, back in the day started by Hartmut Esslinger. Their work has always been solid. They continue to do really great work. I mean, those are the few that come to mind.
That makes sense. Did you say Frog Design?
Frog, yes.
Is that an acronym, or is that?
No, it's like a frog.
Like a frog, ribbit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll have to look that
Yeah,
up.
he was you know, the other interesting thing about industrial design is it really went mainstream through Business Week, and a gentleman there who started writing about design and its effect on business, and he put Hartmut Esslinger on the cover of Business Week, which was like a designer on the cover of Business Week. That's
Wow.
crazy. And that was a major turning point because, you know, up until that point, the first thing I had to do is educate my clients what industrial design is and why it should be of value to you. And then Business Week took it over and just started writing about the value, and it really changed our industry forever, because people in the corporate world all of a sudden were like, oh yeah, we need industrial design. We got to hire somebody to do this for us.
Is there a journalist you said that started writing about it in particular?
Bruce Nussbaum. Yeah, he does not get the credit that he is due, and I've lectured about that before, because he really changed it for everybody. And the other thing that's interesting about industrial design, it was born in the United States. I mean, it's a U.S. based profession.
Oh wow, that's fascinating.
I mean, other cultures have had great sensitivity, like in Scandinavia and such, but
Yeah,
it was born out of the set decorators and designers on Broadway.
Really?
Raymond Loewy, Henry Dreyfuss, you know, these people that's where their roots were.
Writers?
Yeah. Yep.
I never ever do that, but they had to figure out how to do things. I get it. Wow. Yep. That's extraordinary. I did not know Raymond Loewy was a set designer. I love it. If you weren't an industrial designer, what would you be? I mean,
wow. I've never entertained that question, so give me a second to figure it out.
That's okay. Think about it.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, you know, one of the things I'm going to go back to, and I did when I was at RISD, is turning wood bowls, and I'm building a shop at our second home, and I'm looking to get back to just doing that or doing more of that. Mm-hmm. That certainly isn't a different profession. I really don't know, to be honest.
Oh, it's such an extension of kind of your value system, it sounds like, and your passion and your skills. I can see why there isn't necessarily some kind of grand fantasy you had per se about doing something altogether different. Going night.
Yep. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing some teaching at this point as well, but I the little dabbling I've done is I'm just not sure I can deal with the politics and academia.
Yeah, teaching's a whole other animal.
Yeah, it really seems that way.
I worked at UCLA Extension. I was a program manager for the architecture and interior design programs for a while. And the beauty of UCLA Extension is that it was, and you're familiar with this, I'm sure, it was professionals who were teaching. Yes. So they didn't have to kind of become enmeshed in any kind of academic culture.
Right.
And the students conversely got the benefit of learning from people who were actually in practice. It was a fabulous model, I thought. I was grateful to be around. What What made you think to submit to the design awards?
Well, you know, I've been tracking the progress, and we met at that last event right downtown, and I was very impressed with what the work that was there and what had been done. And I really think, you know, I was part of the 2020. I really believe that there should be a larger spotlight on Los Angeles in general as it comes to architecture and design, and especially, you know, there's a big history here, as we just discussed. You know, the Eames and other designers who are, you know, really put some amazing work out there in the industrial design side of things, and of course on the architecture side of things. So, you know, I just did it as a way to participate and support, you know, the museum.